Welcome to this Fertility Circle event today. We are joined by Pilar Manzanaro of Purple Carrot Nutrition. Hi, Pilar.
Hello.
She's going to be talking to us today about methylation and its impact on fertility. Pilar runs Purple Carrot Nutrition, which supports men and women in their fertility journey by providing an individualized functional medicine approach and investigates the root causes of infertility alongside solid science-backed nutritional and lifestyle guidance. So really an expert in her field, and we're very lucky to be joined by her today. And Pilar is one of our resident experts on the Fertility Circle app, and so you can also link to her on that platform, which we encourage you to do so. But today is just going to be a brief session, as I said, on methylation and its impact on fertility. So I'm going to hand over to Pilar.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me over. It's like twice in a week. I'm really excited about this. So as you guys are, can you hear me? Sorry, I'm not on mute, am I? No. Okay. So as Joe said, today we're going to be sort of focusing on methylation. Methylation, as you're probably aware, because you've probably done a little bit of reading, is a fairly complex and very wide subject. So what I'm going to try and do today is just sort of give you a little bit of an introduction, not getting into the whole chemistry of it, and then just focusing on the bits that affect fertility, not just necessarily, through the DNA pathway, which we're really going to sort of talk about a little bit, but also how it can affect hormones, detox, and so on and so forth. Can I just ask a question, because my screen is gone blank? All I can see is the logo for the Fertility Circle. Are we still on? Is everything still okay?
Yeah, I can hear and see you perfectly. I've just put my video and myself on mute to let you present, so everything's perfect.
All right, sorry, me and technology. Sorry. Anyway, so just to sort of get started, methylation to me is one of the fundamental things that when somebody walks to my door, my virtual door these days, I check, because it affects so many areas within fertility. There's a really good thing to sort of have under your belt once you're sort of building up a case to support somebody's fertility. Sometimes we do need to do some testing. Sometimes it's very obvious and we just support it naturally or through supplements. But it's a good thing to always have to make sure that you've looked into, and if not you sort of as a patient, as a client, have a practitioner sort of make sure that your methylation is okay. So in terms of what methylation is, it's a very simple, well, it's very simple, on paper it's actually very simple. It's a process by which a methyl group, which is basically one carbon and 3 hydrogens. So if you remember, back in the days when you were doing chemistry at school, it's a relatively simple formula. When that compound is donated, so basically your body grabs it from food or from your research and uses it to replicate your DNA. So anybody who's been trying to get pregnant, everybody who's gone through any fertility treatment is aware that your DNA replication is at the core of the quality of both your eggs and your sperm, right? Either, well, but then it can be both in the same person, obviously. So DNA replication is fundamental simply because it supports the quality of your gametes, of that egg and the sperm that are going to create an embryo that's going to lead to a healthy pregnancy. And if you backtrack a little bit, you sort of get into what nutrients do we need, what reactions do we need, and you end up with methylation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you, Joe, for letting me do that. Hang on a second, let me find it first. I'm going to share a little chart just to sort of frame the discussion. We're not going to get into everything. It's just a little bit so you can see what different areas methylation can affect and why they're important for you if you're trying to get pregnant. And one thing I just wanted to mention before I go into any more detail, if anybody has any questions, and if anybody's got anything to share, please, I don't know how Joe would like to do this, but either raise your hand or write it on the chat, or just kind of unmute yourself and ask the question. I'm happy to take them as we go along, or I'm happy to take them later as well.
Yeah, so, and I'll be monitoring the chat channel, so if anyone wants to post a question in there, I'll present it.
I tend to like questions throughout because I think otherwise it gets a bit monotonous just listening to me. Okay, so let me just share my screen here. Right. So this chart is by Genova. It's one of the labs I use. I'm not sort of placing anything or anything like that. It's just because it's here and I thought I should really mention it. And anyway, so the bits that we're going to talk about, the parts that we're really going to talk about today are, this area here, sorry, this area here, because this methyl group sort of like running off the cycle. This is what goes into your DNA and makes your DNA stronger and healthier. So it makes your eggs and your sperm better, improves the quality of your sperm and your eggs in order to fertilize, to produce an embryo of better quality. So that's kind of like the most important thing that we're going to focus on today. The reason why the chart is more complete and there's more stuff sort of on the side and at the bottom is because if these areas here, for example, the sort of the folate cycle or the glutathione cycle or detox cycle are not working properly, they're going to be taking resources away from here. And they're going to be dysregulating all this area of the chart. So although we're not going to get into all this detail, we will talk about the foods that you need in order to support this bit. We're not going to get into the details, don't worry. We need to make sure that in order for the methylation of your DNA to work properly, you have enough folic acid, enough methylated B12, but also that your detoxification all right, so far so good. Any questions? Haven't lost anyone just yet?
I think my internet was cutting out. There was one question. You were saying you need folic acid and things for the good methylation function. How would one know if you have poor methylation function in the first place, or would you?
Okay, so I was going to talk about that at the end, but I don't really mind. I mean, I much rather follow. I'm quite happy following that. So, in terms of methylation, there's two different ways of doing this. One of them is not quite as accurate as the second one. So the first one will be looking at your red blood cell folic acid, your red blood cell B12. You can look at your serum B12 and folic acid, not quite an accurate measurement. And also you can look at your red blood cells, because your red blood cells need both B9, which is folic acid, and B12 in order to produce themselves, right? So if either of those two, let me just go back to the chart, are low, this side of the cycle, the cycle is going to be not as good as it should be. And potentially your red blood cells are not going to be of the quality, and you would see some markers once you do your full blood count. Your doctor does your full blood count, that might indicate that you're not methylating properly. But that doesn't exclude that you're just not getting enough in general. So it's not that you're not methylating well, it's that you're not getting enough folic acid from your green leafy veggies, from your avocado, from potentially your beans and pulses, and potentially your liver, and your B12 because you might actually be a vegetarian or a vegan. Right? So it doesn't really, it's not conclusive. The better way to test for methylation is doing a DNA test, a DNA SNP. So a variation of your DNA that is going to tell us how you're methylating. So I tend to do that test, not necessarily at the beginning of my journey with the couples I work with, but more towards the if there's been pregnancies, there have been lost, if there's been miscarriages, if there's been failure to implant, then I start looking at methylation in a little bit more detail. And you're not going to believe this, but I think I've run out of batteries on my mouse.
There's always one.
It's okay. I've got another one down here. I'm going to look a little bit odd, but I still can get to it. So in terms of what to test, if you really want to sort of figure out how your methylation is basically this test here will be absolutely amazing, because it doesn't just tell us, the variations that you could have on your DNA, which are the blue boxes, but it's also going to tell you how your nutrients, or how your nutrient reserves, like your methionine, your SAMe, your choline, your betaine, your B12, your B6, how much of that you've got, and whether that is the problem or that is kind of the bottleneck of your methylation. You can also just go and get yourself tested for what we call the SNPs, the variations in your DNA. So it would be like, everybody's familiar with the MTHFR, so the MTHFR and all the other SNPs that could be affecting methylation in order to get to the right levels of both B12, folic acid, and support your methylation as it should be. If I'm testing for methylation, I don't stop here. I also do COMT, and we're not going to get into that because it's kind of outside the sort of the spec of this chat. But if you're going to go and get your DNA checked, do methylation, but don't forget to do COMT as well, because it plays a very important role in infertility through detoxification here. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, right. So, so you're not really seeing the chart, are you? Because my mouse is here. Okay, sorry, I thought you were seeing the chart, but I don't think you were. So basically, the blue boxes I was referring to at this point over here. So your MT85, your MTR, your MTRR. So these are the SNPs, the different sort of variations on your DNA that you can get that would affect how you're methylating. And the reason why we all kind of get a different sort of variation is because you get one gene from your mom, one gene from your dad. They had two each, right? So you don't really know exactly which one you're going to get. So you get a combination, and your combination kind of predisposes you to methylate better or worse. So when we got questions about methylation, it's really good to get to this area and figure out how you're methylating so we can do something about it. Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about, the methyl group, that's CH3, or that carbon plus 3 hydrogens that we get from food, and we'll talk about what foods contain these two nutrients here in a bit. So the methyl group gets removed from the food, and it gets taken into DNA to make your DNA stronger, and your eggs and your sperm of better quality. So in the other reasons, or there's a bunch of other reasons why methylation is important. So we talked a little bit about, how your red blood cells could be affected. We talked about detoxification, and this one is a really, really important one, especially if you've got any sort of conditions that predispose you to have excess sex hormones. So for example, if you got endometriosis, adenomyosis, if you got any imbalances that make us think your detox pathways they are really busy trying to excrete them, or they're clogged for whatever reason, your methylation is fundamental. Because if you're not methylating properly, but you need your detox pathways to be upregulated, you're going to be taking resources from here. And those resources are going to be put into your detox pathways, right? So say, for example, if you've got endo and your MAH is not particularly high, you sort of like, maybe early 40s, and you're trying to get pregnant, doing this sort of exercise just to see how you're methylating and how your detox is working will be a really good thing to do, because your estrogen gets produced. Well, actually, it doesn't get produced, it gets transformed in our body from testosterone. So we produce testosterone in the ovaries, and then there's an enzyme called aromatase that takes that testosterone and turns it into estrogen. Once we got that estrogen, if there's excess of it, then it has to come out. I mean, it has to come out either way, but if there's excess of it, or your detoxification pathways are not up to, to the level that you need, this pathway might be clogged, in which case we'll be taking resources from here, and those are resources being taken away from your DNA replication. Yeah, so far so good. Any questions? No? Okay, so so detox is very important. Now, another thing that methylation does really well, or it has a very, very positive impact on if it's working properly, is keeping our cell membranes nice and pliable. So cell membranes are incredibly important because they protect the cell structure inside. Our eggs and sperm are basically cells, and they are made out of cells. So the better quality we've got on those membranes, the better the quality for our eggs and sperm, right? So several things can affect that membrane. Fish oils, for example, having the right amount of fat in order to keep that membrane permeable, integer. So things that should be coming in, come in, but things that shouldn't be coming in, do not come in. That's great. And then also, just looking at my notes, also making sure that you've got enough methyl factors in order to keep the membrane as pliable as possible, right? Another element, or another area where methylation plays a really important role is the nitric oxide pathway. You probably never even heard about it, so you don't need to remember this name, but what you need to remember is that having enough B vitamins, having enough green leafy veggies in your diet, having enough animal products, and if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, making sure that you're supplementing with the right type of B12, and we'll get to that as well, that can make your blood vessels we can sort of like make them wider, so it can make more blood get to the endometrium, get to your womb when you are trying to conceive. And that's a really important thing, not just because it can allow your endometrium to thicken as it should, but also because at the end of the day, we need an awful lot of nutrients to carry a pregnancy, and nutrients get to us through our blood vessels, right? So that's a really important thing to bear in mind as well. So
is there
now,
a difference in the outcome of taking supplements versus getting it from green leafy vegetables if you're not particularly keen, or you just want to pop a pill? Is it as good as, or is it always going to be inferior to the organic kind of green products?
To me, it's always much better to get it from the diet, obviously. Right. But sometimes, say for example, if you methylate it beautifully, and honestly, very few of us do this, perfectly. So I've done my DNA, and I can tell that I'm not methylating as well as I could, right? So it's not as I should. Like, we're all completely different, and also as we age, methylation, gets a little bit worse, right? Because there's something called organ fatigue, and even if we like healthy, we exercise, we sleep well, we eat beautifully, we still get in, things are not working as well as they used to when we're in our 20s. So if you're not methylating properly, if you know that there's a couple of DNA variations in there that are preventing you from doing so, the diet alone might not be the answer when you're trying to get pregnant, right? Especially if we find other things, because clients who come to me, they don't really come with one issue. I mean, like, one issue is something that your body is perfectly capable of patching up with other pathways. I mean, the body is an incredible machine, right? One thing breaks down, or one pathway breaks down, there's 3 others that pitch in, right? So typically, I see several conditions, and from experience, you see that the underlying causes tend to be the same, right? So once you get onto the cause, and if you know that methylation is the issue, then you can address it. And supplements at that point in time can make a difference. So there's 2 ways of doing this. So you can do it blindly, you just get a supplement and you hope that it works, or you go when it works, or you just go and test and know exactly what you need. Because if you're looking at this chart I've got in front, you've got in front of you, you can see that there's a lot of different pathways, right? So it is a complicated chart, and actually this is a very summarized version. If you go the real one, it will have like about 300 different boxes, which we would be talking about for the next 6 months. But so if there is any sort of areas here that you over supplement, they could potentially clog a pathway. So you need to be very careful with how much you supplement and what you supplement with. And also because there's interactions between nutrients, you don't want to go like, well, you know what, I'm going to go to the chemist, I'm going to buy every bottle, I'm going to take it. No, because that could actually mess up with your health, right? Trying to get pregnant or not, right? You have to be really careful with what you supplement. So first is always diet. If we think that diet is not enough, then figure out what you need and then get the best supplement for yourself. So if we're talking about methylation, and we're trying to just do the basics without testing, because you can really get to do the test, or because of finance issues. So then just look at getting methylated B12 and methylated folic acid. Don't just get folate. Don't get just box standard folic acid and B12, because what that could do is in fact clog this pathway. Right, so it's very important that when you're looking at methylation, your B vitamins are methylated, because otherwise they can actually play against you, especially if you go for very high doses.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about. I think we're just about to move onto nutrition. So
see your face and not just the chart. Unless
you can see you can. Can you see the chart? Or
yes, we can. But are you still talking to it? Because if not, it's lovely for you to.
Okay, well, I'll talk a little bit and then I'll do the chart again. See, like the problem is that my mouse is down here with my laptop now, so it's a more complicated technology. You just love it. Anyway, so in terms of nutrition, so if you've been trying to get pregnant for a little while and you've been doing your reading, one of the main things that we recommend that people do is make sure they get enough protein. Right, because at the end of the day, we are made out of protein. When I used to teach in the schools, and I used to tell the kids that, protein was the Lego block of our body. The more Lego blocks you've got, the taller you grow, the stronger you are, right? So we do need to get protein with every single meal in order to support our fertility, because at the end of the day, our DNA is made of amino acids, and those amino acids are made out of protein or come from protein, right? So we need to make sure that we get it with every single meal. So say, for example, a lot of people like eating porridge in the morning. I've got absolutely nothing against porridge. It's just a very, very carby meal. So unless you get some nuts and seeds in there, a little bit of protein powder, or you have a little bit of porridge and then you have something else with protein, like maybe a boiled egg or something like that, you go in low on protein in that particular meal, right? If you're a vegetarian and and even worse, if you like what I call a carbitarian, so people who are like, I'm not very keen on any more protein, I eat a lot of carbs, you might be going a little bit low on protein. And if you're a vegan, you have to be really conscious of making sure that you've got protein with every single meal and enough protein with every single meal. Because if you look at the protein content of an animal product, say, for example, you get a piece of chicken, you would get 30 grams of protein per 100 grams of meat. So that's, you got 30 grams there. So if you get about, depending on your size, between sort of like 70 and 100 a day, you're good, right? However, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you eat beans and pulses for protein, then you might end up being a little bit on the short side, especially if you've got any DNA issues or if there's any methylation issues. Because beans and pulses have a much lower content of protein, but at the same time, the protein that you would find in the majority of the vegetarian sources is not complete. It's harder for your body to get all the amino acids it needs. So why is protein so important for methylation? So let's just go back to the chart. Because the chart starts with something called methionine. And methionine is an amino acid that comes from protein. And it comes from protein, mostly in the majority from animal products. So your lamb, your beef, your eggs, not so much fish, although there'll be a little bit in there. But if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, there's a really good source as well, which is Brazil nuts. And if you have been doing your reading, if you read about how important selenium is as an antioxidant, which also will have a really positive impact on your glutathione, or if you got any thyroid issues and you'd be recommended to have selenium in your diet, you would know that Brazil nuts contain a lot of selenium as well. So Brazil nuts and fertility, I mean, they're actually one of my favorite things for fertility, without overdoing it, because you can always overdo it, right? So we don't know how much selenium you can get per Brazil nut, because it depends on how much selenium is in the soil. But having sort of like 2, maybe even 3, they're not very big every day. If you need selenium supplementation or a little bit more in your diet because of thyroid issues, methylation issues, detox issues, it's a good thing to do. So we've talked about protein here. Protein, or the amino acid methionine, gets then converted with magnesium and potassium, which are nutrients that we get from the diet as well, we're not going to get into something called SAMe. And that's called that, I mean, we call it SAMe, but it's basically S-adenosyl L-methionine. I had to look that up every time. So it's a complex that comes from this particular amino acid, and then it started the final stage of the methyl group donation, the beginning of your DNA replication, right? So that's how important that is. Sometimes we might supplement with SAMe, but just remember that if you overdo it on the SAMe, you might actually end up clogging this pathway here. Yeah, and you might actually not have enough resources to get down to your detox area. That could be a bit of a problem. So if you're going to supplement with SAMe, test first, see how much you've got, see if SAMe is the key. Because it might not be that. It might be that you don't have enough betaine in order to get, from the bottom of the cycle all the way up to recycling your amino acids so you can start all over again. Because this happens every nanosecond about 1 million times, right? So you need your methionine basically on tap. But methionine doesn't get completely used up. It gets recycled, but it needs to go through this pathway in order to be recycled. And for that, you're going to need some betaine, which actually is very easy to get, in the diet. A little bit of protein, so your animal protein, but also if you're vegetarian, you've got an amazing source. You got beets, so all your beetroots, like the red and the golden, and even that candy stripe on there is absolutely delicious. That would help you support the recycling of the methionine. Any questions so far? Anyone sort of still with me?
Nothing's come in, so I think people are listening intently.
Intently, okay. Right. So, first takeaway, protein is very important. Make sure you get a portion of protein. And a portion of protein is basically the size of your palm. I've got enormous hands, right? But which is lucky for me because I quite like fruit. So a portion of protein is just about 100 grams, the size of a deck of cards. If you're talking about, vegetarian protein is probably a couple of handfuls of beans. Yeah, but just make sure that you get it regularly, because if nothing else is supporting your methionine, your methylation cycle, and your DNA replication, i.e. your egg and sperm quality and production. So all the fundamental sort of nutrients that we need. So we talked about the betaine, which is a very important one, and we can supplement as well, but you have to really be careful, because once you start sort of supplementing only one of the nutrients, the rest of them can get slightly out of whack. So do be careful with that. Anything you get from the diet should be absolutely fine. So choline is also very important, and it comes from some foods that are, to me, fundamental for fertility. Things like eggs, liver. And with liver, I'm kind of like in two minds, because I don't think I can't eat it. It's just, yeah, no. But you can put it in food. You can put it in your bolognese. You can put it into a bean stew. It literally disappears. So once you've sort of like managed to sort of like chop it up and sort of like cook it with some tomatoes, it kind of like goes. But it's very high in vitamin A, so you have to be quite careful with that. So it's okay to have it up until the day you ovulate. From ovulation onwards, it's not a good idea, because it can be teratogenic. It can affect the development of the fetus. And that's one of the reasons why the NHS and the World Health Organization recommend that we don't eat liver pate and liver, if we're trying to get pregnant. But one of the things that we find in clinics sometimes is that people are deficient in vitamin A. And vitamin A is very important for your hormonal production and hormonal balance. So vitamin A is necessary, and you can get it through animal sources, meat, eggs, and definitely liver if you like it, but do not go on the liver, or don't eat liver after ovulation. Now, if you're vegetarian, you can get something called beta-carotene, which is an amazing, it's a carotenoid, and it's an amazing antioxidant, and the body can turn it into vitamin A. But again, genetically, we are very different, and some of us go from beta-carotene to vitamin A very easily, and some of us don't. And unless you've done your DNA panel, you don't know how well you convert. So it's a good idea to make sure that you get your sources of vitamin A at the beginning of your cycle before ovulation. So far, so good. Okay, so let me see, because I got a little note here, the things I did not want to forget. So anyway, we talked about DNA replication. We've talked about the importance of checking, certain variations of your DNA to see how you're actually managing this entire cycle. We talked about B9, or folic acid or folate, and B12. So in terms of the diet, I'm not quite sure how much detail I've given on that, but in terms of how to get these foods from, or these nutrients from diet, B12 comes from any animal product. So if you eat eggs, but you're a vegetarian, you should be getting at least a little bit. It'd be good to supplement a little bit just to make sure that you're getting enough if you're not eating animal products regularly. Do make sure that it's methylated B12. Now, in terms of folic acid, green leafy veggies, beans and pulses, avocados, and again, liver. So you see, like, there's certain foods that keep coming up, and it might not be the foods that you particularly want to eat. Like, sort of beetroot is not what everybody loves. Definitely not liver. It's a little bit like Marmite. You either hate it or love it. And but a little bit here and there might help with getting your nutritional status to the levels that you need.
Is Marmite good for B12? Is Marmite actually good for B12?
It is actually. It does have a little bit, but just remember, it's got a little bit of it. It's got B vitamins. However, you don't, because you eat such a minute amount. I'm not quite sure. I mean, it's good if you're vegan, because that's one of your very few sources, but you might still need to supplement. It's a minute amount. It's an incredibly salty food as well, so you need to be sort of careful with how much of that you take. Okay, so let me just so stop sharing that, and let's just talk about foods for a bit, because in terms of what you can do from now, it's kind of make sure that you got the foods that you would need to support proper methylation. So we talked about folic acid, the B12, we talked about methionine, which is basically an amino acid, so get that protein coming in. We talked about choline, we've talked about magnesium. So we talked a little bit about magnesium, and magnesium, if you're working with a nutritionist, or even if you've done a little bit of reading, you know how important it is to support your hormonal balance, but also to help you with the sleep. And because being stressed and sort of living our lives, well, basically the way we live them now, you know, we're too busy. We just not really sort of like, you know, building enough rest and break times, including myself. Okay, you know, I mean, it's kind of like full disclosure here. We're using up too much magnesium. So magnesium comes again from like green leafy veggies, avocados, nuts and seeds, pulses. So make sure that you have those wholesome sources of foods in your diet. A little bit of magnesium at night as a supplement, like magnesium bisglycinate, which is very gentle, could really help with sleep if you struggle with it as well. So we talked about the particular one, and other foods that you kind of could really sort of supplement, or you know, through diet, easily through diet, in order to support that entire cycle, would be the rest of the B vitamins, for two reasons: because they work as what we call cofactors, so they help the production of those, you know, every step of the way in that cycle needs other elements to kind of trigger the next phase. So B vitamins, especially B3, that comes from meat, chicken, dairy products if you're not dairy free, and again, green leafy veggies, right? So if there's one thing you're going to do, is make sure that you have one green leafy veggie every day, right? So you get your protein and you have it with either broccoli, spinach, or kale, or mustard greens. Just get those green leafy veggies, and don't forget your herbs, because herbs are actually a green leafy veggie, and if you like them, just put them on everything.
And if you just like broccoli, for example, is it just all right to have broccoli every day, or do you need to mix up these green leafy veggies to get a bit of different ones?
I think variety with food is definitely the spice of life, because at the end of the day, broccoli is an amazing food, and it's going to support. Let me just go back to my chart, because I love talking about this. Hang on. Just bear with me and my mouse under the table.
It's quite a challenge for people that are quite picky like me to eat sort of beetroot and liver and, you know, lots of leafy veggies. Feels like quite a challenge, whereas I like broccoli. I could just eat that all the time.
Okay, so you know, I agree with you. Like I can't. I mean, I do buy livers sometimes. I buy organic chicken livers, and I put a few when I'm making a, you know, either a chili con carne, chili non carne bolognese, or a lentil bolognese. It disappears. Other than that, no way. And beetroot, I find that, you know, I like them roasted. If not, you can put them in a smoothie.
Okay.
You can sort of make yourself a lovely red smoothie with, you know, with like, you know, raspberries, flax seeds, some walnuts, a bit of oat milk, and you throw in a beetroot there. Or you can put it in a soup. So if you roast it and you're making a roasted root soup, you put a little bit in there, and it kind of disappears. Or you can sort of slice it very thinly with a mandolin and put it in a salad. Anyway, so what was I? Oh yes, we were talking about broccoli, and so broccoli is incredibly important for detox, right? So in terms of, you know, so green leafy veggies will help, you know, like broccoli would help with your methylation here, but it would also help with your detoxification here. So if you sort of support here and here, then your DNA replication and your egg quality and sperm quality is going to be improved, right? But now, because broccoli, like any foods, I mean, I don't believe in superfoods. I do believe in super diets, but, you know, superfoods don't exist. So if you're looking at broccoli is got, you know, a list of, you know, nutrients as long as my arm, but, you know, that's just the particular sort of food. So it's good to sort of mix it up. So get broccoli and then get a little bit of cauliflower, and the day after go for kale, and then don't forget about your green beans. Mix it up a little bit, because having the same food all the time deprives you of some nutrients. Yeah, so try to mix it up.
We've had a question come in. Yeah. How does dairy affect methylation?
So methylate, well, the thing is, dairy as such, it wouldn't really affect the process itself, you know, in terms of, you know, if you're eating a lot of dairy, your methylation is going to be out of whack. However, if we go back to the chart, let me just show you. So we do two things. So dairy is pro-inflammatory for everyone, right? So some people deal with it a lot better than others, and some people react to it. The more you react to it, the more inflammatory, the more pro-inflammatory it is for you. Also, it contains hormones. So because methylation helps you reduce oxidation. So your methylation is going to, your methylation or your methyl resources are going to be depleted if there's a lot of oxidation and inflammation. So if you eat a lot of foods that are pro-inflammatory, you're going to be depleting them a little bit. But also because dairy has hormones, you're going to be affecting your detox. So that bit of the chart is going to increase, and there's going to be less resources for what you really want your methylation to work. So indirect effect, I suppose.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there's 2 questions here. Is another one there?
No.
Oh, this. Okay. Yes, nutrients. And this is just the last couple of bits, and then we'll open to questions if there's anything. So we were talking about the B vitamins. So B2, B3. So we talked about the green leafy veggies, the nuts, the seeds. So I mean, snacking on nuts and seeds is an amazing thing. So if you snack and you need your snacks, to keep you going through the day, great. Have some nuts, some seeds, some hummus, some carrots, amazing. If you're not a snacker, don't start. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if you don't need it to balance your blood sugar, you don't need those extra calories, right? Now, your B2, so B2 and B3 are really quite important. So B2 also comes from, again, protein. So your meat, your eggs, your green leafy veggies, and also your whole grains. So if you're eating grains, if you're not on a paleo diet, your whole grains. So there's nothing worse for fertility than eating refined carbohydrates. So because it's sugar, and sugar is pro-oxidative, it's inflammatory, it doesn't really have any nutrients. It's basically empty calories, right? But if you get yourself, barley, which does have a little bit of gluten, so if you're gluten-free, please stay away from that. But you can get oats, you can get quinoa, which is not really a cereal, but still has lots of nutrients that would support your methylation. You can get millet, you can get amaranth, you can get brown rice, germinated GABA rice. There's loads of really good options that can help you there with your B2. And the last one is your B6. So B2, B3, B6, folic acid, which is B9, and B12. So the conclusion here is, if you're going for a supplement, don't just get B12 and folic acid, get a B complex, a well-rounded B complex, because that's going to support your methylation as a whole, right? And that B6, again, is coming from whole grains, it's coming from wheat germ, if you like it. So if you like a little shot of that what's it called, with germ grass, you can get a little bit of that. Also beans and pulses, avocados are fantastic foods, not just because of the fats that they contain, but also because they're very high in vitamin E, which is an incredible antioxidant, and also B6. And with that, I've got a little listing here, so I'm just making sure I'm not leaving anything behind. Oh yeah, glutathione, sorry, really important one. Last thing I'm going to mention, and then we'll open for questions. And if there's no questions, you can always sort of message me later if anything comes up. Sorry, just bear with me. Sorry, the mouse. There we go. So very last mention here. Okay, so the very last step on your detoxification pathway driven by methylation is glutathione. So a lot of my clients came to me sort of already supplemented with glutathione. I'm quite conservative on that, and for different reasons. We're not really going to get into it. So a bit of glutathione might not be harmful, but loads of it might actually really mess up with your redox pathway. So be aware of the amount that you're taking. So, but glutathione from diet, it's a really beneficial thing to have, because it helps you excrete toxins, it helps you balance your hormones, and it supports your methylation, so you're not taking resources away from your DNA replication. And guess what glutathione comes from? So your broccoli, your cauliflower, your cabbage, or your brassicas, your Brussels sprouts now that are like, sort of the thing that we eat around Christmas time. So all your brassicas, or your or your garlic, your parsley, your spinach, your beetroot again. All those fruits are very high in glutathione, and they are a very good thing to have on a daily basis in a rotation sort of mode. Not all the time, eating the same veggie, but just making sure that you have a little bit of each of them in order to support your detoxification, give you fiber, give you antioxidants. And that's the last nutrient I was going to mention. Any questions? Anyone else, wondering anything about?
Yeah, there was one question that came in. Should men be taking folic acid or supplements on this?
It depends. It's clearly one of those things that, if you need folic acid, you need to take it, whether you male or female. So for women, they give it to us, and typically they give us really high doses of folic acid without methylating, which is not particularly useful. But they do that when they're, just to prevent spina bifida. They don't really give you that for methylation. So when you go to the doctor doesn't really think about your methyl cycle, doesn't really think about it. For men, if there's any issues with sperm quality, if there's any issues with methylation, if the red blood cells are low, if they're not eating any green leafy veggies, it might be a good idea. But if you're going to do that, just remember, you need to keep that balance of your B vitamins. So giving a massive dose of just the one, unless there's an underlying issue or a reason why that particular one needs to be supplemented, then it's probably not such a good idea. So you just go for a balanced sort of multivitamin or B complex.
And just lastly, you mentioned sort of the tests. Is that just go to your GP, or do you need to kind of see a fertility specialist, nutritionist? How should one access those tests?
Okay, so two things. So your GP wouldn't really. Okay, you know what? Since COVID, like GPs of like surgeons are doing different things. Like I used to know exactly what they do, not anymore. But they wouldn't really do that test directly unless there has been miscarriages. Fertility clinics might do them a little bit more, a little bit earlier on in the process, and then you can do them privately. But if you're going to do them privately, just make sure that you then check just a couple of those variations, because that doesn't give you the full answer, right? So do the whole panel so you get to the bottom of why this is happening, yeah, especially if there has been miscarriages.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for making quite a complex subject much more simplified and boiling it down to.
Well, I'm not sure we got there in the end, but it is a very complex issue. So anyway, conclusion is, don't forget your protein, don't forget your green leafy veggies, and if in doubt, go test.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Pilar, for your time. Really informative, and we enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
All right, thank you.